If you can find a set of core questions that can help you navigate where you might be keeping yourself small, and questions like, is this thought kind, true, or helpful? Things like, what do I get from this? Really exploring that question, like, what is this doing for me? And then who would I be without that thought?
Hi, my name is Kristen Constable, and welcome to the Soulful CEO path, where wisdom blends with strategy and success is measured in alignment and impact. And this podcast is all about guiding soul-centered bosses like you through the integration of soul and strategy in business. In each episode, we explore the journey of creating a deeply fulfilling business that honors your values, nurtures your spirit, and serves the world. And if you've ever experienced any kind of discomfort around being an entrepreneur or sharing your voice as an entrepreneur, you're going to really love today's episode with guest expert, Dr. Amanda Tobe. Dr. Amanda Tobe is an industrial organizational psychologist based out of Toronto and is the founder of a clinic offering career-focused psychological services. In her practice, Dr. Tobe and her dedicated team provide both individual and group support and therapy to clients facing workplace challenges such as imposter syndrome, public speaking anxiety, job stress, burnout, and career transitions. So Amanda, welcome to the Soulful CEO path. I'm really excited about our conversation today and the unique perspective you're going to bring to us about your entrepreneurial journey and some of the challenges you've come up against in your journey around things like imposter syndrome, public speaking anxiety, and how you have worked with that yourself, but also with some of the people that you get to work with. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kristen. And I just also want to say that it is really an honor to be on this podcast with you today, because I'm not sure if you realize that you're a huge part of my journey to becoming an entrepreneur.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah. Well, the best part is, we've never really met in person. Like, we've done all online. So that's really interesting to hear. And I'm so
I have so
intrigued.
I have so many flashbulb memories of just watching certain posts of yours, or a conversation that we had actually back when I was kind of thinking about my career change and career pivot. And I'm happy to talk about those conversations that we had earlier today, because I think that it was such a huge part of just kind of setting me up for success and just kind of preparing me for the road of becoming an entrepreneur and kind of picking a niche, picking avatars, all those types of topics. And so I really credit you also with kind of getting me to where I'm at today.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That means a lot. So why don't we start there? Is one of the things you have shared with me is that, becoming an entrepreneur and seeing yourself as an entrepreneur was not something that you had growing up, or you thought it was going to be that way. And then yet you are here. So tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, exactly that. I grew up never thinking that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always kind of thought it was for people that weren't necessarily passionate about what they wanted to do. It never struck me as someone who's really passionate about their work ends up starting a business. And so I always knew I was interested in psychology. And then when I was in my corporate job, I kind of had some feelings about not feeling like it was a really good fit for me. So I went on this pursuit of really wanting to figure out what I wanted to do that lit me up. And during this journey, I discovered a niche for myself where I just kind of thought of you have this expertise in public speaking anxiety. You have your PhD in psychology. Why don't you develop this practice or build even a solo practice just for myself, which is part of my journey, but what has changed now. But the thought process at the time was why don't you just build this to help other people? But as I built this practice, I really learned that I love building businesses. I love the process of helping others do that. I love mentoring other psychologists. I love mentoring other, just my clients were entrepreneurs as well. So I just really love the creative process of building. So I can be both things. I can be a psychologist and also an entrepreneur. I don't have to just pick the psychologist side, which sometimes my colleagues will say I don't want to see myself that way. I'm have you let yourself see yourself that way? Because it seems like your practice is even kind of going into that place of trying to build something that is really impactful, that you've put a lot of intention behind.
Yeah, super interesting because I think a lot of people, I kind of talk about them as like craftspeople, craftsmen, craftswomen who are like really good at their craft. And then they get into business and they're like, oh, wow, this is actually a different skill set. This is a different thing that I have to learn. This is all these different things. And some people love that and other people don't. And so I love that you're differentiating those two things is like being a psychologist and also being a business owner or an entrepreneur, however you want to say it. And you're loving that dynamic and you get to see how you get to be both.
I love that part about my schedule because like some days I have client days and then some days are just like marketing and figuring out like my vision plan, my quarterly plan, things like that. So it's like this balance between like doing things like today and being
Yeah.
here with you and like getting to see clients, which I had before you and then after you. So
Yeah.
it's like I love this kind of like dynamic of getting to be both things and both
Yeah.
things together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, because this podcast is called the Soulful CEO Path, a lot of the conversations I have with people is about their entrepreneurial journey and really the identity shift that comes along with seeing themselves as a soulful CEO and owning that role of business owner. What would you say some of the biggest shifts were for you in the switch from psychologist, craftswoman to that and business owner?
I think that, you know what, it's funny because like the identity thing, I think was for me was thinking of myself as an entrepreneur and giving myself that permission to think about myself that way. So I think that along the way, the behaviors that I think by virtue also for myself, because I am a mom of three girls, for me, it also has also been really prioritizing and planning my time to like making sure that I'm thinking about all the different pieces of owning a business. And
Yeah.
it can't just be facilitating client work. And so I think for me, it's also with like delegating and learning to build that team of people so that I
Mm-hmm.
can build my pipeline because I really need a team of people to do what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
And I want to share with the listeners later today about one specific habit that I feel like has really helped me starting in February of 2024. A couple of things that I really do as part of like my monthly and quarterly rituals and weekly.
Yeah.
And that really just kind of helps me stay focused on what my goals are. So I think that the other thing too is just really staying committed to goals that I pick and trying not to overdo things, like really trying to pick the one or two things for that month and really putting my resources into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. We'll get into that for sure because you know me, I'm all about the rituals and the importance of those things. So I'm like super intrigued too to hear what that habit is and we can all learn from you on that. But we'll come back to that. Right now, I'm curious because one of the things that I know I work with a lot of clients on when they get on this entrepreneurial path is that they're super passionate about their work. They love what they do. They love working with clients. And then they get into the business building part of it and they come across some of the things that you, I think, help people with in your work are things like imposter syndrome and showing up and sharing your voice, whether that be like on stages or, on social media, things like that. Why do you think it's such a universal, like, I know not everybody, but it's a lot of people that have these things that they come up against as they're taking on something like building a business?
We are hardwired to think negatively. So that's just the way the human brain works. And I think that what I see a lot of in my practice are four core fears that really come into play for different people at different times. And they relate to things like fear of negative evaluation, fear of losing control, which really relates to my public speaking anxiety clients. So fear of losing control is like feeling like my body, for example, if your heart is racing before a podcast like this,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like that feeling of like, oh my gosh, my body's losing control right now. What's happening to me? So like that is one of them as well. Fear of having power. So fear
Mm-hmm.
of kind of being that person who's in the room who really is expected to be the authority on that content, to be the expert. And like, I don't want to assume that position for some people. And a fear of failure, of course,
Mm-hmm.
too. So a fear of failure in terms of like how other people are viewing them being a beginner.
Yeah.
Fear of them seeing them try on LinkedIn, fear of seeing them try to make reels on Instagram, whatever it is. Like it's really, there's four core fears that I really see that come into play with a lot of my clients, and it would be those four.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I haven't heard the like fear of losing control one before and the body thing. And when, as soon as you said that, it brought me back to this moment. It was, well, when was it? It probably was like I started my business in 2016. So probably around like 2017, 2018. And it was the biggest public speaking event I had ever done. And I remember being so sweaty and knowing that I had to like go in front of all these people. And the thing that's just going through my mind is like, oh my God, I'm just like standing there and I'm like, I just hope no one can see this. And it was like the hardest thing about it was just like letting go of that piece and just like trusting that I was going to be okay and not be like my body let me down, you know?
You nailed it. So that's what you were able to do. That was so brilliant in that moment, is just kind of like trusting. I think you said trusting that I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do in my public speaking groups and in my work, is trying to help people build that self-trust, because the more what we resist persists, right? So the more we kind of try to be like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that feeling. I want to avoid that feeling. I want to prevent that feeling. Then it just kind of creates this relationship to that feeling of like, well, this is a bad thing. And then it's like insomnia almost. The more that you want to sleep, the harder it is. Yeah. So it's the same thing here with public speaking. But yeah, completely, that a lot of people have these sensations, not symptoms. So I call them sensations, but it's all about reframing the fear. So if you were able to, in that moment, just kind of say that these are just butterflies, or maybe I'm actually excited to do this. Like there's a lot of parts to how I help people change the narrative, change the stories about the fear, or any fear, really. It's all about the narratives, about how we kind of create those stories. Where does that belief come from? Learning to reshape them, asking yourself, like, do I want to work on this belief? And so all those types of questions. So I sometimes think about beliefs almost like purging clothes from your closet. So almost like asking yourself, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but kind of asking yourself, like, does this look good on me anymore? Have I outgrown this belief? Do I like how I look with this belief? Kind of that idea. So I think that this idea of going through someone's imposter syndrome closet, the belief closet, and kind of saying to themselves, like, what's not serving me anymore? And working on reshaping those beliefs.
I love that metaphor for sure. It's great, because sometimes those items, those beliefs, they're so like, it's like our favorite sweater. And so we've worn it for so long that it feels comfortable, but it doesn't work in the new level that you're wanting to go to, or within the new environment that you want to be in. So it's a really cool metaphor. And you're so right. It's not just with public speaking or any of those kind of things in the journey of entrepreneurship. I see it all the time with people, is like, we get this strategy in place. So it's like they know what to do. The strategy is there. And then it's like, boom, into this like wall, because they've hit this belief that won't allow them to move into kind of what's next for them. And so it is such a dance between the inner world and the mindset, and then the outer strategy.
Yeah. And so one of the ways that I really help people with this too, is to help them understand, like, what is the ideal state. So I really like to take a behaviorally focused lens in the work that I do with people, to really help them identify what's the current state, what is the ideal future state, what is it going to take to get there. And I'm more of like a solutions focused psychologist, where each week when I have a session, let's say with a client, we focus on one or two things to kind of address those gaps. And they come back and tell me like what worked or what didn't work. But sometimes the conversations are also just about the beliefs themselves, about where they started from, and all those things we've just been talking about, because they're usually beliefs that have been hanging around since they were like 8, 9, or 10 years old, or they're not even aware of why they have it in the first place. Or as soon as we talk about the belief itself, they're just like, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I find that like certain questions that I like to use to help to work through certain thoughts can be really helpful. So it's kind of like CBT, but like more of like a modern CBT approach, where I really find that equipping people with a certain set of questions, which you're so good at too, Kristen. I see how you do this in your work as well. But like equipping people with like a set of questions to be able to navigate some of those beliefs and be able to uproot them, unpack them, and just allow them to think differently. So I find that that's really been helpful for a lot of people, are just like, what are some questions that are easily accessible that can allow me to maybe just kind of flip the belief and just be able to move on and get that action item done
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so powerful to have those things in your toolkit because from my experience anyways, and you push back if you don't agree with this, but from my experience, this stuff never goes away. It just gets like, it shows up in a different form. So for example, maybe at the beginning of your business, doing like a sales call or something like that, or like selling your products and services is like the most terrifying thing in the world to you. And then you get through that and you like are good with that. But then you start hiring a team, and now you're showing up for a team, and you have a different sense of responsibility and things like that. And now different things come into play. So this like toolkit can help you at every next level. And that might be a little bit different, but there's all, in my experience anyways, with entrepreneurship, and I'd love to hear yours, is like every next level, there's like a new challenge. And that's kind of the fun of it in some way.
Yeah, there's always a new challenge around the next corner. And that's why I find that like if you can find a set of core questions that can help you navigate where you might be keeping yourself small. And I'm curious to know if you have any of those questions as well. But a few of my favorite questions, which I'm sure you might have heard of before, would be questions like, is this thought kind, true, or helpful?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of starting with that question, can I know that with 100% certainty that it's 100% true?
Yeah.
Asking questions like, where do I feel in my body? So like bringing in somatic work too. Other questions that I find really help me would be things like, what do I get from this?
Mm-hmm.
So a whole lot of worry. So really exploring that question, like, what is this doing for me? And then who would I be without that thought? Or like my favorite questions, and just to really kind of bring myself to that next level. I'm trying to think for myself though right now, as far as like, what are some of the challenges that I've been up against? I think for me, actually, one right now has been that, so recently in April, I incorporated to becoming a group psychological practice. So I now have a number of practitioners that work for me. And this required further changes as far as how I'm working, when I'm working, and I guess to what degree I'm working as a clinician right now.
Right.
So really right now I've taken on like really sliced my individual load to focus on getting the business up to a place where, like, for example, training or like all the contracts, and making sure that my practitioners have clients first. I mean, those are all examples of things that is where my focus is right now.
Mm-hmm.
So right now it really has been a major shift in what my calendar looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also just being okay with like how financially that changes through cycles of owning business. Like there's cycles where maybe the finances are a little bit lower than what you would have seen in the last quarter or a year before, but those dips are required. And even for me to get my license and make the career change that I did required also a huge kind of drawback as far as financially for us at the time, because I took 2 years to get my license.
Mm-hmm.
Also at the time, I didn't expect COVID to happen. So for me, it was like, yeah, it was all worth it. It was all part of the process. But I guess that's the point. It's a process, but you have to trust the cycles and also be okay with your priorities shifting and the model changing.
Such a good point is like sometimes we think of growth as exponential, and then when doesn't go that way, it's like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. But instead, that this is what it looks like, and it can move up. We grow, but it's not always up, up, up.
Yeah, and it's learning to trust the process, and like learning to also make those changes to the model. Mm-hmm. So constantly, and my model's changed so many times, Kristen.
Yeah.
And back when I got my license, and I thought what I was going to do only was like helping people with public speaking anxiety. Well, then the pandemic happened. Right. So people weren't interested in public speaking. Like, who do you know who cared about public speaking when the pandemic hit, right? Yeah. So it was kind of like at that time, then I really had to think about, well, what are other ways I could help people? And then, as I've said to you recently, I became a group practice as well, which wasn't part of my initial. So I think that that's one of the things that for anyone who's listening today is just like being open to the model changing and being open to what might be an opportunity for you. And even something else too, is that in my group psychological practice, in January 2023, I started offering my public speaking groups. And maybe this was a self-limiting belief I had before going into it, because I was just like, I don't want to do group stuff. I think I'm better at individual work. And it has been one of my biggest surprises has been
Mm,
like, I love my groups. I love
yeah.
them so much. And it's like now a huge part of my practice.
Right. Yeah.
So sometimes it's just back to those stories, and sometimes the self-limiting beliefs like show up in those stories. Well, like I'd be better at it's kind of like self-talking yourself into something because you're afraid of kind of assuming the role in
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? So it kind of was showing up in that way. It wasn't so it was just like the little creative ways we avoid things.
Yeah. We're so sneaky, aren't we? Sometimes it's like, it's not always obvious. It's some of those, yeah, little like talking out of. Thanks for sharing that, because I think you're right. And my experience being in business now since 2016 is that in the last few years, anyways, for me, and I've done more of my work's gone online, but things are changing really quickly. Like what used to work last year doesn't even work this year. And so if we get too grippy onto like, well, this is my thing, like I've got to do it this way, or like I don't want to do that, it can feel like things aren't working, but it just is the evolution of needing to keep up with what people want, what is happening in the culture, and in things like, COVID, for example, or the economy or things like that, and really looking at how do you adapt to those things so that you can continue to serve people and show up in your gifts and strengths.
Totally. And I think staying open and curious, I think are one of my biggest strengths is just learning to my interest in learning is just my
Yeah.
interest in how people are thinking. And sometimes there's certain client calls I don't even have to take, but I just want to because I want to hear about like what are people stuck on? What are they enjoying, not enjoying? Like I'm really, really open to that feedback and interested in the psychology of how like they're thinking about this experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's really an important characteristic is to, as you said, not get too grippy and loosen the grip
Mm-hmm.
and just be like a sponge. I think that for me, that's been always like one of my greatest things too, is just like learning to be a sponge and just be interested no matter who I'm talking to, but whatever I'm talking about with them. And because I never know when I can apply it down the road.
Yeah.
So it's just that interest in people. I think is huge, as you were even just talking about too. The economy, that's all part of interest in people as well.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about those habits now, because I think the mindset piece is so crucial. But then there's also the behaviors, and those two really go hand in hand. And we can't create change without the behavior, even if we change it on a mindset level. So tell us about this habit that you introduced back in February. I'm interested in hearing about all of your weekly, monthly rituals.
Yeah, so I'm going to do my best to describe it here because it's something that's visual. Well, two
Okay.
things that are visual, which I'm a very visual person, which is why they both are. So I'm going to show you a little bit on the camera here as I'm describing it, and hopefully I can do my best to share that with the listeners too, so that it really transfers over. There's two major parts to how I plan out my monthly goals and daily goals as well. And it starts with my glass erase board that I have over to my right hand side here. And it has, which, these are things that this is not specific to me, but I have like my goals for the year. I also have, so I have 4 goals for the year. I have my quarterly goals and I have by month. So that's kind of how I start with that. What I do next though, is that I have a monthly bingo card that I use. I don't know if you've seen this at all on my Instagram,
Okay.
so I'll just show you quickly here.
No.
So this is my one for the month of August. And
Oh,
I
so
have a
fun.
combination. Yeah. So I have a combination. So what I do is I take, it's a combination of personal and professional goals for the month. And certain ones just naturally carry over from month to month. And some are specific to that month. So what I first do is carry over any of those monthly goals that I've written down on that dry erase board that I have, and really try to break them down into smaller steps on here first. So
Okay.
I add those on to here. And then I also add on things like, related to that, things like marketing goals. I might have those in different colors on this bingo card. So I have that. I have health fitness goals. I have relaxation recovery times and goals for the month. I have other goal setting pieces specifically laid out on here. Even just for me to do this erase board, I have it as part of my
Yeah.
bingo list for the month. And just other things as well, like whether it's physio, like a blog post a month. So there's certain things that I just naturally know I'm going to carry over from month to month because it's part of my business plan, which I also took from you. So it's hopefully one of the things I wanted to talk about today as well is have the importance of having that business plan and like knowing what are some of the key levers that are related to the outcomes that I'm really working towards. So I find for me that I have, this is like one of the things I always have beside my keyboard is working on this and just kind of plugging through what some of those goals are. So I take this and then my bingo card that is, and then would create a weekly to-do list from that. But I've been doing this ever since February. And I have just found that for myself and my clients, whether it's a client that is an entrepreneur, whether it's a client that's also looking for a career change or just a client who's just like looking to design their best life. It's just, I find this has been one of the habits, this bingo card that has really stuck with people.
Yeah.
That even if I haven't seen them in 2 months, they're like, Amanda, I'm still doing my bingo card.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's awesome. Like when you've created a habit that's sticking, you're like, that's helpful.
Definitely. Oh, I love it. It's so fun. And maybe you can share with us like for your professional opinion and then your personal opinion on this. But I've tried so many different tools, like whether it be like online, like ClickUp, task managers, Asana, like all those kinds of things. I've tried planners. I have sticky notes on my wall, but there's something about this like very hand drawn like notes thing that just works better for me. And I just know that if it goes into like some like tech tool, it just I don't feel connected to it. And so I'm curious from like your personal and professional opinion, why is that? And like, is that common to have something kind of like this be more effective?
So I think that the reason for it is because unless you have like a third screen with just that Asana up there every day, it's not visually there. And so we know when it comes to building a habit, like you can read this in Atomic Habits too by James Clear, like you want something to be visual. So I have my vitamins beside me on the desk beside me here too. So like things that you want to be able to include as part of your daily habits, you want to have them so they're visually within your sight, within your eyesight. Thank you. So it's really helpful to be able to see it. And so I think for me, it's the fact that I said it's beside my keyboard. It's like, it's always there. So even if I go away for a week, I bring it with me. So I put it in my laptop bag along with everything else. So I think that's really what it's about. I do have some clients that tell me that they're allergic to paper and insist on doing things with tech. But I really feel that for something to stick like this, for me, it's also, as you can see, mine's very colorful. I've color coded it. Like I have fun. It's not just in pen. It's fine if you want to use pen too. But I really treat it as something that's a bit more playful. And so that also like brings me to usually I have doodles on it as well. I didn't doodle my one yet for August, but usually I have doodles all over it. Little pizzas and donuts, whatever. But like for me, it's just like, it makes it playful. And I'm really, for me, as I'm really thinking about who I want to be, it's like someone who is playful, who makes time for coloring, who can sit there and enjoy the bubbling process. So for me, like part of it is the color. Yeah. And making it joyful too. So I think there's a combination of the personal and professional in there somewhere, but totally. I really, it makes it enjoyable for me. So I put on some good tunes when I do it. Usually I always have a candle on. Yeah. And even right now as we're chatting, and it really, it's about like enjoying that process and making it playful and sacred.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. And that's one of the things one of the rituals that I suggest that people do are these like monthly rituals, but also a weekly, like to do your to-do list for the week or whatever that looks like. And you're so right about it's one thing to go through a task and just do it, but it's another thing to make it meaningful through ritual. So it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it can be putting a candle on or having your favorite beverage or whatever that looks like. And over time, and I hear this in what you're sharing, it becomes something that you have to do. Like you look forward to it. If you didn't do it, it would be missing. Like there'd be a hole there. And that's when you have a ritual that's really like adding value to yourself, but also to your business. And the joy part, I think, is key. And what you just shared is like making it joyful.
Yeah. And I mean, this one, to be honest, my August one, I just did was it 4 days ago? So even if it's late and you missed August 1st or whatever the first of the month is, like I'll even do it if it's like halfway through the month or whenever I can get to it. So, but usually it's something that I'm just already starting to add to my next month's bingo card on a little scrap sheet of paper as well. So I'm already like kind of creating that list of what I want to keep in mind for the next month. So it almost becomes like a parking lot, which I love a good
Mm-hmm.
parking lot because then it kind of,
Yeah.
it's like, it's on the parking lot. It doesn't have to get done this month, but it will get done. So for me, that's also what the erase board also does is like, it becomes like this parking lot of things that not everything is like back to that Eisenhower matrix as well. And just
Yeah.
not everything has to be important and urgent. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just really learning like which things I want to address this month and depending on the urgency and importance and multitude of factors.
Yeah. Awesome. So maybe before we wrap up, one piece that we can bring into the conversation, because this is a great habit and tool. I know you're a mom of 3 young little ones, and I also know you have a big practice. You've got a lot going on. You know, there's a lot, you seem to do a lot. So how do you navigate and manage all of these different pieces that you have going on in a way that allows you to feel aligned and thriving and enjoy all of it?
Yeah, I love this question because it's always like this tension and struggle of just trying to figure out like how to balance it all, and it's not always balancing it all. It's also letting certain balls drop as well sometimes. So I wrote down 3 things that I was thinking about as it pertains to this, and one for me actually has been scheduling limits. So what I mean by that is that my Fridays are always client free, and I started this actually like from the very beginning when I wrote my business plan using your business plan. So, which I really credit you for that, Kristen, because it's the reason why I also wrote my website content in a day is because I did your
Wow.
website, like your whole business plan. Yeah. And what I was going to tell you is just that from the very get go, it's always been like my mandate. Fridays are always client free. So I reserve that for personal appointments or my children's appointments or just like doing nothing for part of the day. Like it's always a day that I have in that calendar. So that's one. And of course, also have to end my day early because I work from home and I work virtually. Our office is virtual. So my kids too, I usually have to end my day early or try to plan. So it's like things where it's not my clients are online if my kids are coming home because they know where to find me. A second one we've talked about already, which was outsourcing and delegating. So just becoming better at that all the time. But the third one is one that we haven't talked about yet, which is stop apologizing. And
Mm,
I think that sometimes I can't get back to someone's email within 24 hours. And rather than saying sorry left, right, and center, I usually just say thank you for your patience and awaiting for my reply.
yeah.
So I'm really modest about. It's not that I'm not apologetic, so it's not. I
Mm,
don't listeners don't take it that way, but it's just the fact that like I'm really mindful of how often I'm saying sorry
yeah.
and just knowing why or in it, and when I am just really being genuine in that and just, but it's just because it otherwise it could become this habit of just saying sorry all the time and it's just that wouldn't feel good either. So
Yeah.
I think that those 3 things have really helped me so far and I'm constantly learning on how to do things in more balanced ways and just preserving my energy because as you said we have 3 young kids and it's a busy household, so
Hmm.
there's always surprises like in every day. So it's a lot of learning along the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting because it kind of loops back to what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation around like loosening the grip and loosening the grip on it needing to, it sounds like anyways, it needing to look perfect, be perfect, you know, get back to people within 24 hours. And some of the freedom and success sounds like it comes from being open to having boundaries, but also then being open to how it needs to look within those.
Totally. Yeah. And the perfectionism, like letting go of that. And the other maybe habit I would also share with listeners that has really helped me. So back to the emailing too, is batch working. I'm not sure if you do that too,
Mm-hmm.
Kristen, but one of my favorite things to do for anyone who's listening is to like think of like a 30-minute chunk and try to like make it like a challenge. So try to
Yes.
write down like how many things can I get done in this 30 minutes or how many emails can I get done? So I jot them all down. It's almost like, okay, challenge is on, I press the timer and it's like, okay, let's go. So I look for ways like that, given that there's no one I'm reporting into
Mm-hmm.
to hold myself accountable
Yeah.
to really to do that for myself and to make things it's constantly coming back to being playful for me. It's like treating
Mm-hmm.
it like it's something that's fun. So because I could just sit on my emails also all day long if I
Yeah.
wanted to. So I just try to like batch work it. So I try to do things like that. But I still could do, with the business too. There's other ways I could do more batch working, like where someone creates all of their social media posts within a day. Like I think that that's also a really cool way to practice that task managing idea.
Yes. It's like such a game changer if you can get into that habit of around how much more productive we are if we keep it into a period of time. And there's something about parents that is like, it's like a superpower. I'm not a parent myself, and I know because I have kind of my time can be expanded. I don't have these hard boundaries around about like kids home at this time or whatever. My tasks can expand exponentially. And then I have these friends that are parents or someone like you're like doing all of these things and you have these three little ones, but it's a big part of it. And when I talk to people about it, it's because like you have 30 minutes to get this thing done and that's it. And then you're not getting any more time in the evening. So we can definitely learn from the realities that parents have when they're business owners as well, if you're not a parent.
Totally. And I'm pretty careful too about not doing work into the evenings. So just
Mm-hmm.
as you're saying, like I really try to shut down everything by 9 o'clock. Like I really have my nighttime ritual as well. I like rituals, just as we've
Yeah.
been using that word today. And having a nighttime ritual of unplugging, like I might have an email or two, but like really I'm just trying to give myself some space
Mm-hmm.
because all day long I'm giving kind of that space to other people. And usually during the day as well, I carve out time for meditations when I need them, or strength training is like a form of meditation for me as well. So
Yeah.
it's finding that space too. And really it's that I really protect that time. Just as my
Mm-hmm.
Fridays, I protect like daily time almost always if I can into my calendar, because then I just show it better for myself and for my family and for my clients. It's for
Yeah.
everyone and for the people that are working with me at the practice as well. So it comes down to holding that time for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's an important like daily self-care practice for me.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I notice the difference on the days that I do and don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Those are such helpful habits and rituals as we've been talking about them that I think could serve so many people, whether you're far along in your business journey or early on. So the final question that I usually wrap with on the show is just asking the same question, and whatever comes to mind for you, there's no right answer, but what does being a soulful CEO mean to you?
To me, it starts with heart. Like I think that that's where my business started, was from my desire to have a passion. So I often will tell my clients to figure out the why and the what first and figure out the how later, because I find that the
Mm-hmm.
how often like right away keeps people from looking at next steps or from like evaluating a problem from different angles. So I really try to help people focus on the why and the what first.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one for me too, as we just have talked about, is like leading myself first. And one of the questions I come back to daily is like, who do I want to be? And whether I'm like waiting for my coffee in line, or whether I'm watching one of my children have a tantrum in front of me, it's just like I come back to that question of like, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be? And I really find questions like that just help me like reprogram thinking, or just help me to keep that vision in mind of like my highest self.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like those two things that I find has really helped me to feel as soulful as I can in my business.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that anchoring question, and something definitely we can all take away just to come back to. So if people want to learn more about you and your work, where can they find you? Where are you most active?
I hang out most on Instagram and also LinkedIn as well. So we can also include those maybe in the show notes,
Yeah.
Kristen. And if people are interested in having a consultation with myself or one of our practitioners, like we're always happy to chat with you. Like we're very like open to speaking with people about their interests and goals. So like I sometimes hear from people being like, oh, like I don't want to reach out till like I'm ready. I'm like, just reach out. Like I'm genuinely happy to chat with you. I'm sure you feel the same. And so I think that that's one of the best ways for people to get in touch with me. Like I would love to hear from you, hear your resources, hear your stories and all of that too. Like I really get excited to hear from people who've listened to the podcast and just becoming a connection with them. So they're welcome to contact me or to find a way to get in touch.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I'll link both your Instagram and your LinkedIn in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on here. This has been a really fun conversation to hear a little bit about your journey and hear about some of the really tangible, practical things that you do to help you thrive in your business and at every kind of iteration and evolution of it. And it sounds like you're up to some really cool stuff and continuing to do great work. So thank you for being here. And thank you to everyone who shared and listening with us. I hope this episode supported you and inspired you in some way. And as always, if you found the show helpful, please hit that follow or subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra inspired today, you can leave a review. It really does help and make a difference to the show. So if you have any questions about what we talked about, just send me a DM on Instagram at Kristen Constable. And as I said, I'll link all of Amanda's information in the show notes so you can connect with her if you want to chat about anything we talked about. So until next time, we'll see you in the next episode.